I've been asked by the education booth to remind everyone, if you have a chance, to please fill out a survey at the education booth, please. Thank you very much.
We got a whole whack of them.
Data system system.
I got about 6 or 7 of them. I'll ask the chair. I'll ask them to give us a list of all the resolutions that are coming.
In past already. Yeah.
The ones that are passed.
Jeff was suggesting we let Dominique get her presentation out of the way first, then we can go. Need a replacement resolution. Hey Shayna, but does this one have a number on it now or not yet? Oh, okay. I was wondering.
That sheet miracle this one is given to you guys. FYI.
For some reason? Okay.
Are they from the kit? Are they,
No.
are they in our list?
Well, geez, I might not.
He just wanted it copied for his presentation.
Oh, okay.
No, all our resolutions look like that, and they're all numbered now. They all have our letterhead.
7, 8. I'm missing number 9.
Number 9. Okay.
Oh no, number 9 is this one, which is passed. Data systems. Child family reform.
Let me grab my
That was passed. Number 6 was passed. So I don't have resolution number 2.
So all that was passed was 005, 006, 008, and 009.
5, 6, 8, and 9. Okay. Alright. Then that means I don't have resolution number 1
Okay.
and 2.
Okay, so the water. Do you guys have all 12 resolutions over here? I'm looking. Oh, 1 and 2 for each year?
Yes. Chief. Good morning, Chief. How are you? Good. Good morning, young lady.
Good morning.
Cameron, are you ready?
Yes, I'm very ready.
Morning, Rando.
Dana, look at you, so little. Look at look at right in front of everybody. Look at. So it's a later to be fighting. Yeah. Be fighting.
I need 5, 6, 8, and 9.
5, 6, 8, and 9. Okay.
Oh, never mind. Hold on. 4, 5, 6. Actually, I only need 8. Sorry. Yeah, I got them. Yeah.
This one here.
I must have some gaps.
Oh, this Lillian.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, do that. This one? When we get to that part, yes, I'll get into it. Well, do they have electronic version of this?
If you want to get people actively involved this morning, maybe we start with a couple of resolutions. from
Send it
yesterday.
to
Okay.
Jeff, and then he can
It's
get
up
it
to
to
you.
one of these other guys.
Who else you can go?
Um,
You want to do a couple of resolutions this morning, Joe, before we get started?
All right.
Let's probably get people going.
Do the health ones?
Do the ones of social from yesterday.
Yeah.
so elder supports? Or did
Other
we already?
supports, yeah. Supports Jordan's principal.
Child and family reform, or did we do that one?
Yes, I can't.
Oh yeah, they're giving us a page. Okay.
3, 4. Oh, I think safe drinking water might have been one.
I think we did that too, and then we did the Nestle drinking boycott.
Did safe drinking water? Shannon said we never did that one yet.
Oh, we didn't?
No.
Okay, we didn't do that one.
Okay.
That one's done.
Maybe we can get these out of the way then real quick.
Okay.
So we did not approve 2, 3, and 4 yet.
Thank you.
So we're gonna start out with 2, 3, and 4, I guess.
Okay, where's number 1 going?
I guess we can do number 1 also. Maybe number 1 could go under environment.
1, because it kind of goes with, it was a recommendation from the Patel member.
Oh right, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4 then. Let's get those out of the way. Yeah. All right. Morning, everyone. If everyone's okay, I'd like to bring the meeting to order. And before we get to Dominique's presentation, we just have 4 resolutions to take care of quickly. Then we'll get to do that, Dominique and Amy. And we're going to do resolutions 1 through 4 this morning. The first one is regarding a Nestle water product boycott, resolution 01.
Oh, okay.
I'll just read it therefore.
Up for the same list. We should have a
On resolution number 1,
new resolution.
Nestle water
Resolution,
product
we can just check off
boycott.
what we got up here, so makes life easy.
Okay, you just read the therefore be it resolved. The General Assembly supports a boycott of all North American Nestle water products, including Aqua Panna, Arrowhead, Deer Park, Ice Mountain, Nestle Pure Life, Ozarka, Perrier, Poland Spring, San Pellegrino, and Zephyrless, which sounds like a disease anyway. Okay.
Ever tried it?
No.
All right. All right. Finally, be it resolved, the General Assembly directs the association and the member nations to cease and avoid the use and/or purchase of all Nestle water products and develop a communication strategy to promote the boycott to a wider audience. Okay, so we have a mover, which is Councillor Catherine Wilson from Hiawatha, seconded by Chief Miracle. Is there anything from the mover and seconder on these resolutions? Where is the mover, by the way? He is around here somewhere.
Who do
Okay, and the seconders. Okay, secondary, anything on this one? None?
Resolutions that it's passed.
Okay, all right. Any other comments or questions on this resolution? Chief Sayers? Oh, is it microphone? Okay, go ahead.
Miigwech. Good morning, everybody. Welcome Nebunagojing, Koyakasid, Chief Dean Sayers from Botswana. Just to strengthen the resolution, I'm wondering if the mover and the seconder would consider an additional whereas that would really paint a little better picture of the corporate perspective of Nestle. It really is probably more applicable as it stands for a general ban on bottled water, but I know there is specific reason why I believe we should be putting this resolution more towards Nestle. There is a corporate, international corporate greed perspective that I think we would appreciate incorporating, and one of our policy analysts is preparing wording right now as we speak. If we could maybe hold off on this particular resolution, but that would be my request to the mover and the seconder, if we could just add another whereas that is more poignant regarding Nestle themselves and their CEO.
Because I know some of the main concerns raised up at Hassab was around their corporate philosophy of water should not be a human right and it should be paid for, those kind of things. So maybe what we'll do then is we'll table this for now, and then we'll have the some of the policy group add in an extra whereas around that kind of wording.
Thank you.
We'll bring this back.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. All right, so mover and seconder, we will table this for now and add that extra whereas. Okay, resolution number 2, safe drinking water. And I'll just go to the therefore be it resolved, of which there are a few. Therefore be it resolved, the General Assembly calls upon the federal government to fulfill its fiduciary obligation to provide funding to implement the 9 solutions identified in the 2018 AI Water Report, including the establishment of a needs-based budget that ensures safe drinking water standards can be achieved and maintained in all First Nations, with 100% of the cost covered by the federal government. Further be it resolved, the General Assembly calls upon the federal government to end the use of its discriminatory federal ranking formula as a system for funding First Nations drinking water, and instead co-develop a new regulatory framework that ensures funding for First Nations is triggered as soon as water does not meet quality standards. Further be it resolved, the General Assembly calls upon the federal and provincial governments to work with First Nations to co-develop the enforcement and implementation of environmental regulations that protect ground source water from contamination, and invest in collaborative research with experts for new technological innovations related to safe drinking water and water protection. Further be it resolved that as an interim measure, the General Assembly calls upon the federal government to make all monies committed to ending boil water advisories accessible to all vulnerable First Nations, and to support First Nations pursuing relationships with municipalities to secure safe water. Further be it resolved, the General Assembly calls upon the federal and provincial governments to provide funding to the association to host a 2-day water summit for AI community leaders and relevant staff to discuss water issues, solutions, and establish a plan for moving forward. Finally be it resolved, no part of this resolution shall derogate from the treaty rights and or existing agreements and or negotiations involving any of the member nations. Okay, that's moved by Chief Stonefish and seconded by Chief Miracle. Does a mover and seconder wish to speak to this resolution? None. Okay, does any of the Assembly wish to speak to this resolution? Okay, seeing none, I would ask if anyone is opposed to the passing of this resolution. Any abstentions? Seeing none, I would declare this motion carried by consensus. This resolution carried. Thank you. Resolution number 3, elder supports. To the therefore be it resolved, AIAI is to develop a relationship with the Ministry of Seniors Affairs with a technical and political component in order to improve communication and alleviate barriers to First Nations accessing senior support funding opportunities for areas including, but not limited to, specialized family violence, elder abuse prevention training, full circle of care networks and advanced care planning, additional health infrastructure, additional in-home living supports, security services, culturally based and trauma-informed care services, and traditional medicines. Finally, be it resolved, the AIAI Chiefs Council and political executive place political pressure on the Ministry of Seniors Affairs and other relevant ministries as appropriate to advocate for additional First Nation specific funding streams for seniors. And that is moved by Chief Frank, seconded by Chief Miracle. Is Chief Franks here today? Oh, yes, there he is. Okay. Do the mover and seconder wish to speak to the resolution? Chief Franks.
Grand Chief, for my part, I believe the resolution speaks for itself.
All right, thank you, sir. Does any of the Assembly wish to speak to this resolution? Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll ask for a vote on this. Is anyone opposed to passing this resolution? Are there any abstentions? Seeing none, I'll declare this resolution carried by consensus. Thank you. Resolution number 4, Jordan's Principle. Therefore, be it resolved, the General Assembly directs the AIAI to continue to advocate for immediate remediation of outstanding Jordan's Principle implementation issues and any other related issues as they arise. Further resolved, the General Assembly directs the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians to begin exploratory work on developing a process for the member nations to begin addressing health, social, and educational gaps for the children in communities. Finally, be it resolved, the General Assembly directs the AIAI to work with Indigenous Service Canada's First Nations, Inuit Health Branch, and other relevant governments and or programs in determining funding for communities to build their own capacity to address their health, social, and education gaps and other relevant Jordan's Principle cases. And that is moved by Chief Miracle, seconded by Chief Franks. Do the mover and seconder wish to speak to this resolution? No. Okay, thank you. Any of the Assembly wish to speak to this resolution? Chief Sayers?
Thank you. And just in regards to the comments that I was making yesterday around the provision of a focused staff person in each of the member nations, I believe there's room for interpretation there. And maybe, Grand Chief, if we could keep that in mind as we maybe look for those kinds of funding pots, that there's a process to see that happen, rather than finding it, exploring it, and then calling a Chiefs Council meeting and then making the circulation or the division of the monies, just for expediency's sake, because I know we are really stressed with a lot of the requests and the navigation through that process. So if we, the sooner the better for us. Yeah, just as kind of like a comment in regards to the implementation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any of the Assembly wish to speak to this resolution? Yes.
Susan Barberstock, Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. Can I just ask, when you talk about health, social, and educational gaps, that maybe we could put the word emotional in there, so that we're looking at the child holistically, so at their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects, I think would be covered under that.
Okay, so you wanted to add mental? Or
emotional.
Emotional, okay. Okay, to the mover and seconder, okay with that friendly amendment? Chief Miracle, are okay with that addition? Okay. Chief Franks, are you okay with that addition? Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else from the Assembly wish to speak to this resolution? Okay, seeing none. All right, so let's go to a vote on this. Is anyone opposed to this resolution being passed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. I'll declare this resolution passed by consensus. Thank you. All right, so we'll come back again with that water Nestle one. But for now, I think our next item on the agenda is the presentation from our deaf friends here, Amy and Dominique. Thank you.
Sukuli. My name is Amy Ireland, and I'd like to talk about Oneida Sign Language, or OSL. Oneida Sign Language was established in 2016, and it is in partnership with Marcia Ireland and Max Ireland. Marcia Ireland is a deaf woman who has taken American Sign Language and Oneida Sign Language, and she has created Oneida Sign Language based on our culture and principles. So there used to be Plains Indian Sign Language a long time ago. It was around for many, many years, 400 years, and it's still being used to this day. It was used for elders to communicate, for business transactions, and it was used for general discussion when people didn't share the same language. In the 1800s, it became illegal, or it was no longer allowed or forbidden for children to be using plain sign language. And the government instituted a policy designed to use civilized tribal people. Native American deaf children were sent to deaf residential schools where they were taught American Sign Language. They were no longer allowed to use Plains Sign Language. They were assimilated into that culture, and their identity and their culture was lost, having gone to those deaf residential schools. I'd like to show you an example of Plains Sign Language, and I have a video that we have found on YouTube, if we can pull that up.
My friends, I'm glad to see you all here today. I've walked you from every direction to sit in this council. I have come myself from very far in the east. Young men are not learning your sign language, and soon it will disappear from this country. It is for us to make a record of it for those who come after, before it becomes lost forever. Nick Washington, you talk to me with your hands. I arrived last night from far away over there. My father, Washington, is the great chief of all the Shoshone. I am a Shoshone. I am here to tell you all I know. I will not tell you anything that is not true. I am a Korean. I feel very glad. We used to fight all these people long ago. That is all over. Now we're smoking, eating, and laying together in this life. Long ago we used to fight each other all over this country. White men said, stop fighting. We need each other here with white men. All brothers. We eat and smoke here together. It was very good. All of it. brought me here from the Flathead country, on the other side of the Rocky Mountains. I have never seen these people here before, and can't understand their language. They are all my brothers. We are all the same race. These people all use different languages. They are all my people. We meet here for 3 days. I am glad. I have been brought to this Pegan country. I shake hands with all these people. I am glad to talk to these friends I have finished. I am a Sioux. I have come from near Poplar Creek. I am a Crow. I have come from far away from Pegan country. Have arrived. I have eaten until I am forced to the throat, and I feel good. I have finished. I come from the Mandan country, to this Pegan country. That is all. I am Mandan, one of the Earth Lodge people. I have been sent for. I have come. I am the Cheyenne. These people are all my brothers. We talk together. I love them all. That is all. I live with the Pegan. This is my ground. I am glad to see my faraway brothers. I look at them, eat and smoke. That is all.
My voice is ready. It's Cuba.
Oh my. Look here. Look at me. This is my country. I know it. My heart is good. From far away off there, my father's a different tribe that comes. Good. We've been eating together. I'm glad. That is all. I have come to the Pegan country, the Little Rocky Mountains. I am here to talk to them. I am here. I have come from the Arapaho country. White Horse is my name. I have come to Fort Simon, my Pegan friends. I am a Cinnabon in the Little Rocky Mountains. I have come to talk signs to white men. This is my lodge and my country. These people have come from different directions. I am glad. That is all. Look here, I'll tell you something. I'm Saraswee from Calgary. Two of us have come to the Pegan country. We have arrived. I see them all here and feel happy. We smoke and eat. I am well. That is good. I'm Dorothy from Calgary, Alberta. All right. I see big men from other tribes. That's all. I come from far away in the east to meet you, and have gathered you from all directions.
As you can see, it's very interesting how plain sign language is used when a common language is not available. And this was many, many years ago. And it's not used any longer, and it's because culturally that's been taken from us. We're using English or American Sign Language now, and that part of that culture and part of that language is gone. And that's happening to deaf people as well, when they use their sign language as well. Marcia Ireland is a deaf woman who has been deaf her whole life, and she is of the Turtle Clan of the United Nation of the Thames, Ontario. She has 5 deaf children, 9 grandchildren, 7 of which are deaf, and 2 who are hearing, and we call them children of deaf adults. You may wonder what children of deaf adults means. And that means that children who are hearing and who use spoken language, and their parents are deaf, and so their first language is sign language, and they can communicate in both spoken language and sign language. Marcia is also a survivor of the residential school system for the deaf. She went to the school that was available in Milton. She was there from, I believe, the age of 4 until she was 16. And she experienced quite a bit there that was awful. Oh, there I am. So Marcia has identified many barriers to communication for people who are deaf. Interpreters. There's been lack of access to interpreters to be involved in meetings and to happening at events. There historically haven't been interpreters available. Now that has changed, where we have interpreters available. In terms of accessibility and being involved, meaningfully involved as a deaf person in community events has been difficult. It's been a struggle for a long time. And it's very distressing as a deaf person to not be involved and to not be included in these events. Marcia finally created a relationship with the elders, or a relationship was established between the elders and Marcia about including deaf people and creating Oneida Sign Language. In 2016, Marcia established the 5 modules for Oneida Sign Language: introduction, discussing my family, the Thanksgiving address, office phrases, and council phrases. And Oneida Sign Language is often based on movement. It is very different than American Sign Language. I have an example of some of the Oneida Sign Language being used by Marcia from a YouTube video.
Dia kina helado kadi nen. Yung kinol ha. Awang hit. Onong kwa togung. O yung kwa ong. Kalon de sung. Ohne kanus. Ojita hasu. kundi leo su yung kisotawa nida etwa ji ojisto kwasu la di sakayudeza kayeni ungwedak sungwaya dizo
As you can see, Oneida Sign Language is very different than American Sign Language. For example, the sign for water is very different than the sign for water from American Sign Language. Water has an initialized sign with a W to indicate water being drank, and Oneida Sign Language is much more visual. Oneida Sign Language was created because we have approximately 25 deaf members. But we actually have more than that because there are deaf children who are being impacted by a hearing loss and can be included in this number but are not included in this number right now. What's important is about the power of our language and taking back the power of our language and learning our identity and our culture through sign language and being included. If we only use American Sign Language, we're missing a very large piece of our culture. At approximately 6 months old is when babies start to access sign language and access language. So we're able to teach them sign language, and they can pick that up from approximately 6 months old. Having a bilingual environment is very important. If a child is born who can hear and has deaf family, they will learn sign language in order to communicate with their family members. It's going to be something that they learn as their first language that they develop with communications with their family. And just as spoken language, Oneida language is important to carry on to next generations, we have a responsibility to also carry that on to our future generations for our deaf members. It's time for us to take back our cultural identity and have access to language, whether it be, and for it to be in Oneida Sign Language. All of our nations need to be inclusive of our deaf members. My father, Max Ireland, often talks about the circle of inclusion, and that to be inclusive, we all have to be included. If there's one that's not included, that no longer makes a circle. So if deaf people are left out of the circle, we cannot call it a circle and have it be called inclusive. We have teachers who are applying our culture, our Oneida culture, to future generations, but we don't have that for Oneida Sign Language. And we need that for respectful sharing, teachings, stories, history. We need that to be included. Marcia Ireland's granddaughter, Grace Elijah, she is one of the examples that I would like to talk about. She is 11 years old, and she at this time knows 4 languages. She knows Oneida spoken language, English language, American Sign Language, and now she's learning Oneida Sign Language. It's amazing to watch her grow and to pick up all of the languages with ease. And we realize that that's something that we can easily do in order to share the Oneida Sign Language with all people. We are going to have an Indigenous Deaf gathering here, July 4th to the 8th. And its purpose is to provide exposure to deaf people about the culture that they've been missing and about Oneida Sign Language and what our goals are and how we can share and regain all of this and work together for a better future for all of our deaf members. It's going to be incredibly interesting. For anyone interested in learning Oneida Sign Language, we do have some books available, and it's up here. It's oneidalanguage.ca. We also have videos on YouTube that teach some Oneida Sign Language, and we're in the process of making some publications. There's going to be Oneida Sign Language classes for people interested in taking them, and they're going to be starting in the fall of 2018. So this is the culmination of 2 years of work since 2016, the partnerships and the creation of Oneida Sign Language, and the partnership with the elders and the communities that are here. So that is my presentation. Thank you. Okay, my sister will be next.
Good morning. I would like to start my presentation and discuss accessibility. My Longhouse name is here on the slide. I am going to talk deeply about accessibility in my presentation. I wanted to add that we had a youth council meeting back in March, and it was amazing. The youth were very open-minded and willing to listen to what I had to say. I did this presentation there. They learned a lot. We all had a lot to think about as we left, so it was an amazing experience. So hopefully we can recreate that here today. This is my agenda for today, the things I'd like to talk about. I'd like to start by discussing the concept of accessibility. Secondly, language accessibility specifically. Thirdly, identifying what the barriers are in our communities. Fourth, resolutions and law. And then I will offer some resources at the end. So accessibility, the definition of accessibility, there's lots of examples, lots of moving parts to it, but it refers to the design of products, devices, services, and environments for people who experience disabilities. Ontario does have laws to improve accessibility, the AODA, Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and it's still in process. In addition, we have the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Ontario Building Code. When we say accessibility, just the term accessibility, it limits what we think about. In my perspective, I feel that it's a very limiting term. People think about people with physical disabilities, and they don't think about language accessibility, which is what I want to talk about. There are many languages out there that are visual in nature. We also can refer to Braille, to people who use various technologies to understand the information being communicated to them. So there are lots of ways that we can talk about accessibility focusing on language specifically that I think is often not talked about. It specifically allows for communication and information sharing between individuals. So when I think about accessibility, I think about people with disabilities, and then I think about language as separate categories. So in terms of language accessibility, I see three groups of people who can benefit from that. You have people who can speak English, who can speak and hear, and they use English, often use English. Then we have those of us who use sign language who are unable to hear or speak. So they may use American Sign Language, for example. And you may have individuals who are unable to speak for themselves, but they can hear. They may use technology. They may use computer systems and that sort of thing. And again, often we see English in those cases. But those are all examples of people who require language accessibility. Next slide. Thank you. This is a quote from Max Ireland, my father. Amy referred to the circle of inclusion. This is another quote where he said, "You guys are our future leaders," speaking to youth, that we always need to be reminded that even the smallest section of a circle, if it is removed, then it's not a circle any longer. So we have to work hard at maintaining inclusion, which means maintaining that circle. Otherwise, it becomes exclusion. So in terms of barriers, I have a list of examples here. There are a variety of categories of barriers: education, social health services, family, youth services, employment, even general activities. There are 8 main categories that prevent us from accessing information and communication, and they're listed here. Architectural and structural barriers, information and communication, technology, systemic, attitudinal, employment development barriers, health and wellness strategy barriers, and education systemic barriers. I think it's important to mention that even within our constructs, our traditions, our ceremonies, and our language, we experience barriers as well. When we're speaking in a traditional language of our nation, many deaf folks can't access that. And they want to be able to access things independently. They want to be a part of what's happening around them. They don't want help. We don't want help. We want to just be included. We want to have that access just like everybody else. But often what happens is we're very disconnected and excluded from environments when we can't access the language that's being spoken. In AFN, there's a resolution document of resources for engagement. And it was passed in May, recently, in Quebec. And that was specifically on distinct First Nation accessibility legislation. It was passed. I have a copy of it here. In addition, there are international treaties and human rights standards that support this. When we talk about UNDRIP, for example, and when we speak to what the United Nations has spoken to, they recognize that accessibility as something that is a human rights standard. So one example is that the United Nations has recognized sign language as a human right in amongst a variety of other rights that they've ascribed to people with disabilities. Sign language is one of them. It is officially recognized in their documentation as a human right to have access to sign language when needed. There are also resources there that can be used to accommodate the unique needs of First Nations peoples with disabilities. So now when we think about our communities, our needs, our rights, and our inherent rights, we think about our approach to fighting for those. And we have lots of resources, we have our own way of decision making and deciding to lobby for the rights that we want and that we need. And I think many people too, when they hear this presentation, they may start to think, yeah, of course we're trying to be accessible. We know people with disabilities, need certain things, and we're trying to provide for them. I think what happens often is that a lot of the standards of accessibility that we see start in big urban centers, and they don't necessarily stretch out to First Nations. They don't stretch out to our reserves. We don't see the same type of accommodations and accessibility that we see provided in large urban centers. And people who are on our reserves and on our territories require those same accommodations and supports. One accommodation that has come into play is Oneida Sign Language. And it doesn't just benefit the deaf members of our nations, it benefits all of us. Because a lot of people think, oh good, the deaf people have this sign language, that's wonderful. But there are so many other people that benefit from this. In addition to the general population and deaf people, we have people who are deaf-blind, we have people who have Usher syndrome, a variety of other issues that mean sign language will benefit them in a huge way. Not to mention, again, I stress, the general population, everyone benefits from this. Ideally, what we're going to see is that we're going to see interpreters who take training and they're able to pick up on OSL as well as learn our language and our culture so that they have competence in interpreting in our environments. If we see OSL continue to grow at the pace it has, we're going to see many more opportunities. Especially for our deaf members. There potentially will be opportunities such as becoming language teachers, working in those environments. So we're talking about jobs in a communication sector that may not be there right now. So there are definitely opportunities we could see grow. Prior to having Oneida Sign Language, we did have deaf members. Often what happened was communication wasn't completely clear, and people weren't even aware that they had deaf members in their community. But once we noticed Oneida Sign Language taking off and growing as fast as it did, suddenly our deaf members of our nations were recognized. People saw them, they were represented, because that language gave them that representation. And in addition, those deaf members started to realize their own culture and their own traditions and feel like they were part of something. These are the resources that I mentioned. I wanted to add these 2 links on my slide. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dominique and Amy Ireland. In honor of these 2 beautiful young women sharing their knowledge with us, on behalf of AIA, we would like to present them with gifts. If you have any questions or comments, you can step up to the mic now, please.
I would just like to commend Oneida First Nation for this. It's just amazing that the community saw the need, looked at it, embraced it, and actually did something to create positive change. So I just want to say, Miigwech, for you guys being here today, and what a great community to be able to embrace that.
Thank you.
36 voting delegates registered, so our quorum is 19. So next on our agenda will be the presentation we were supposed to do yesterday, but we got kind of cut off. So we'll go to Chief Dean Sayers for his presentation on community safety.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dean. I'm the Chief of Batchewana First Nation, and I want to acknowledge Randall, your time as Chief. Been nice working with you in your role as Chief and other roles. We started kind of along the same time years ago when we were both health directors, and Phil Franks was also health director at the time too. But it's been great knowing you. And I'll see you around. I'm sure you're going to be still in the same circle somewhere in some role. And I want to thank Oneida for putting this together, and really great to have Oneida Sign Language here presented this morning again, and really great to see you guys. Chris is going to kind of help me here, I believe. Maybe not. Maybe I'm going to be doing this. But anyway, I'm going to be speaking on a number of items. For your information, we'll start with human trafficking. And London is a hotbed for this kind of more prominently and more, I guess, visible in our communities, or maybe not visible, but even in Sault Ste. Marie, it's considered a hub. Recently, there was a motel that was raided in Sault Ste. Marie in the East End, and there was the human trafficking was going on there. And one of our council members, Patty Lesage, she actually works for Missinaba Cree, and her role is to go around and talk about human trafficking and how much of an issue it is within our communities and border communities along the Seaway, Sault Ste. Marie, Thunder Bay. It's really prominent. We had a gathering a few months ago in Sault Ste. Marie, and there was testimonials by people that had experienced human trafficking, and there was they were being picked up in Sudbury, one of the stories, and they were put in a hotel, and they were drugged, and they were forced to go out into the community and enter into prostitution. Well, this one lady talked about how she pretended that she took the drugs, and she managed to sneak away and run away, and she was harbored in a safe environment. But it's a real issue that is becoming even more and more prominent, and basically that's what we're bringing more to your attention here, is that we have been spending a lot of our time addressing the issue from an intervention, reactive perspective, but we'd like to see more attention focused on prevention, education, bringing the awareness to broad mainstream. There are, like Patty and Missinaba Cree have been to the North Shore Tribal Council and provided awareness of the issue, and Patty, I'm sure, would be available to come here as well. But there are other opportunities, I think, that we may want to develop as far as an association is concerned, to create an opportunity to have our association lead that as well. So I'm kind of looking towards even more attention being given to this issue in the future. In regards to corrections reform, the Justice Committee at the Chiefs of Ontario brought an interesting fact to light at one of our Chiefs of Ontario assemblies recently, and they talked about the recidivism and people that are involved in the courts. There's, it's almost an addiction where people continually go in and out of jails and they have a hard time breaking that cycle. There's actually in other provinces across Canada treatment centers to help people deal with that cyclical nature of being incarcerated. And it's something that's absent in Ontario. So that's one of the issues that the Justice Committee at the Chiefs of Ontario is addressing. But it also brings to light many other issues that are happening within the correction system in Canada. And we are, as we're all aware, we're overrepresented, and we have a unique history that's not really captured or reflected in how the Canadian system deals with us. We have restorative justice measures that are starting to come back. We had one restorative justice program in our area, and Chief Lyle Sayers next door to me was really doing some great work with the restorative justice program. And I remember him telling me that it became such a good program that they had to eventually shut it down because it was taking away from mainstream's justice system. And he said it was so successful. So we want to see restorative justice come back. I met with our police department this past week and the local OPP detachment staff sergeant, and we talked about hunting infractions, and we do have fears around having our Indigenous rights being tried in provincial courts, especially around hunting, because they'll have long-term effect on us and they'll set precedents. So we are concerned. So the OPP in our area have made some commitments to pursuing and seeing come to light a restorative justice type of court that's coordinated and convened by Batchewana. Batchewana already has fisheries court, and we have our own enforcement, and we have some of our fishermen, if they've been violating the rules of the fishing, will be tried by our court, and maybe they'll be fined by way of having to take 100 pounds of fillets to the elders or something. So we're looking at a culturally relevant type of restorative justice program, and we want to see that extended and evolve, and once again, I guess, recognize the unextinguished rights of our people to have our own courts and justice systems. There is as well the GLADU reports that are being generated are somewhat, I'm hearing concerns about that, but regardlessly, there is so much room for us to be asserting our positions within the Canadian and settler government's restorative or justice systems. We do need to see more research, funding, and increased capacity so we can further develop our Indigenous justice systems and legal principles. In regards to emergency response, there is a real gap in the quality of service provision or equipment that's provided in our communities. One of the things that we notice, as you may be aware, in our area, our communities, Batchewana, is made up of 3 communities approximately 50 miles apart. And in Sault Ste. Marie, we have a fire service agreement with Sault Ste. Marie that I don't know what the value of it is. We have another fire service agreement in another neighboring community to one of our farther communities, which is Gooley Mission. And then in Batchewana Village, we have another fire agreement with the neighboring volunteer fire department. But our people end up having to pay higher insurance rates because the response time for the fire department is so high. It takes them more than 10 minutes to get to a fire. So again, our people don't have the ability to have the same as Ontarians do as far as equitable fire protection services. And the fire chiefs of Ontario, the Indigenous fire chiefs, have brought it to our attention as well with regards to the lack of firefighting infrastructure, trucks and hoses, equipment, officers, facilities. There's a disparity there. We need to start to see, I believe, more investment in our ability to provide proper fire services in our communities. And when we see the tragedies, those tragedies are a lot of times preventable. If you live in Sault Ste. Marie, they'll come and knock on your door and make sure that your smoke detectors are working. But when you're in the First Nation, we don't have those resources to be able to have those types of services and programs in place. There's such there's an inequity there, and we need to spend more of our time trying to provide equitable fire services for our people. The other thing that we're noticing with policing is that, and in our community we have the same issue where when people have some of these mental health issues, we dispatch the police, and the police don't always have the proper, they're not equipped to be able to handle those situations, and there ends up maybe not being such a nice situation. So we're trying to, and I'm hoping that we're going to see more of these case management and teams in our communities to help with some of the people that are having the issues with mental health, and police aren't always the best option. Sometimes there is a need for them to be more involved, but we need to see that in our communities, a collaborative service delivery model. In regards to policing, we're actually, as you may or may not be aware, in the early 70s, when the Chiefs of Ontario was formulated, it was around that time that the policing program started to take life, and the service provision by our people started to came into fruition. But the 19 that us are involved with, the 19 policing services that we're involved in through the Ontario First Nations Policing Agreement, are basically complementary programs that complement the OPP. We see an evolution happening. There are a lot of deficiencies with our current policing program. Number of officers, proper facilities, our supportive staff. There's so many things that we want to see in a new policing model. We've been, over the years, having to deal with a really basic model that hasn't evolved aligned with the growth of our communities. In our instance, we have 5 officers that try to service our 3 communities 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's the expectation from our people. We also recognize, though, that it's a complementary to help with the existing OPP provision. But we are looking towards a model to provide us with full policing in our communities. It's coming along. We did receive a good announcement from Canada more recently, $200 million over 5 years for the whole country. Sounded good, but when you break that down, it really doesn't meet our needs as a people. So we are meeting this week with Minister Goodale on Friday to talk about how Canada can really play a larger role with investment in our policing programs. And Minister Goodale has finally made some time for us. There are many things that we wanted to make sure that not only Ontario and Canada are aware of, that we need to put wheels on, we need to have action on. There's a model review that's happening right now, and the First Nations policing communities are probably aware of where we're at with how we're looking at the existing complementary model, but there's many other models, including being involved with the tripartite agreement with the OPP, the federal government, or the province, the feds, and ourselves. Service provision through the OPP with a police commission or a police advisory body. We also see existing First Nations, Ontario First Nations policing program, First Nations joining a regional model like APS, or in our instance, maybe revisiting original historic types of regional models, like there was the White Pine model we talked about historically, even aligning ourselves with the municipal models, but we are looking at what would be in the best interest of our communities as far as how we provide policing. We are still looking at the models, but the existing policing program model is set to sunset in March with whatever type of policing program your community is wanting to pursue, having to be in place by April 1st of 2019. So like at home, we are getting close to having to make a decision on which particular policing model works best for us. And all of us are in similar circumstances or situations. There are some issues that we are trying to address right now, with including the inadequate number of officers, the police governance bodies. There's a lack of those, no mechanisms to ensure adequate services or equality of services with off-reserve policing, unreasonable risks and liability assumed by First Nations, and insufficient administration and infrastructure funding. So, in regards to next steps, funding from the Ministry of the Attorney General and Community and Social Services to increase our capacity for prevention and victim counseling, and anti-human trafficking action plan and emergency response protocol development, basically what I reviewed earlier. Again, looking at for corrections reform, Ministry of the Attorney General, Indigenous Justice Division to develop First Nation bylaws, and for us as well, it's not just bylaws, but it's developing laws. We are working with them to develop our laws, even including taking a look at the cannabis issue within our communities and creating a law which again ties into the law of general applicability, and if we provide that law, our law will suppress it'll suppress the settlers' laws. And we're looking at culturally appropriate diversion programs at the AI level. Continuing to work with the Chiefs of Ontario Justice Committee to support establishing those healing, and that'll leave us again out on the outside, but we have an opportunity to make those arguments to the minister on Friday. From the federal side of things, the province seems to be more workable with us as of more recent. I guess we'll see with the new premier, but regardlessly, we've got some commitments on the province to be able to provide their fair share of the financing for our policing program.
And I would think it would be advisable that we ask for a meeting with both ministers, the federal and provincial minister, to see how they can work together, because they just always were playing one off against the other and not doing anything. They both saved an awful lot of money all those years.
I agree. I think that's something we should make mention of, just so the Assembly is aware that these are kind of the things that we will be talking about on Friday. And those are great suggestions, Chief.
And the need for additional police officers is in the South, because that's where criminal gangs are operating with their drug trafficking and all that sort of thing. So,
different resources and programs per se, but they fall into these hands because they're so accessible to other people. What I am suggesting is that through the CHRT funding programs, and the fact that it affects so many of our young people per se that are taken away from our communities or run away from our communities, use it as a prevention plan and develop some safe housing on the reserve.
A few words regarding our young people over here. I just had to step out for a little while, and as I was going, then you started, asking people to come up and say something, but I couldn't turn around and come back. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that I've known these young ladies, that don't speak, And for a long time, I knew when they were, I think, first born, or else maybe it was their parents, but I know it was in the late 60s. And just to see them like today, and then
Thank you, Lois. And in fact, when we come back, we're going to be tackling that accessibility resolution as soon as we come back. And but we're going to take a quick 15-minute break, so don't go too far. And we're almost at the end now, I swear. We're close.
Hello, my name is Amy Ireland, and today I'm here to teach you how to sign. My name is, my name is, my name is. That was my name is. Thank
Okay, we're going to try to get started in a few minutes here. Also, just a message from all the vendors out there to please go and visit them and to bring money. Okay, so we'll start in about 4 minutes.
Hello, my name is Amy Ireland, and I'm here to teach you how to sign. I am angry. I am angry. That was, I am angry. Thank you, and see you next time.
Blaine comes back and we'll be nice. I'm being nice today.
Shana's making the rules,
It's
apparently.
gonna rain.
Okay, Deborah Vincent. All right, Deborah Vincent. And she wins the big golden bag. Here you go, Deborah.
We'll do some more.
Yeah, we'll do some more before the end, so here you go, Deborah. All right, thank you.
I think Blaine is still here.
Blaine is still here? Well, maybe we'll throw his name back in. Okay. I was wondering if you can get the maintenance and kitchen staff front and center. Here, and there's a lot of the other kitchen staff, but we're going to have guests for all of them. So please give them a hand for providing the services, cooking great food for us. Thank you. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you very much. Okay, now get back to work. Okay. 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 I think we'd like to start out with our first, the resolution around accessibility strategies. So I don't know if there was anything special Kristen wanted to mention out.
How many resolutions do we have?
Sorry.
Quinganao Lomwa. In the event of time and expediency, I'm not going to read everything on the slide. What I'm going to do is, you can see what's on the slide, and I'm going directly to our next steps. So under permit to take water, a good first step for AI member nations to achieve this would be to take advantage of existing funding opportunities to hire staff dedicated to developing a climate change and/or energy and infrastructure modernization strategy, provide climate change mitigation, energy conservation, and community energy planning training for newly hired staff, and also conduct project feasibility studies to begin project implementation. Under Great Lakes ecosystems conservation, our next steps would be funding is frequently made available for First Nations to engage in ecosystem conservation projects, but there is little capacity to secure the funding.
Chief Miracle?
There's the issue, Denise, of the hauling of radioactive liquid waste from the Chalk River site down to the Savannah site in the United States. If there's spillage and that gets into the water will become radioactive, so it could really be a devastating issue, an accident were to happen. And so I know the municipality of Niagara opposed the hauling of liquid radioactive waste through their jurisdiction sites in Ontario.
I can absolutely do that, yeah.
And that there will also be the information, the testing results be shared with the First Nations who may be affected.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any other questions or comments? Chief Sayers.
Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to bring to your attention, and maybe we do have an awareness of the water diversion that's being contemplated at a meeting in Duluth on June 20th. Maybe have somebody involved. There's also the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement that is related, and that's where we're looking at, and I've been to these meetings in Chicago where there is a group of agencies that the premiers and the governors have endorsed to help improve the quality of Great Lakes water.
They have an obligation not only to accommodate, but also to accommodate our concerns moving forward. So I think that needs to be used a lot more by our leadership because it seems like we're still struggling in that area of consultation.
Okay, I guess the Nestle resolution is also ready. So I don't know if we can get that up on the screen. And I think Chief Sayers just wanted to add an extra whereas regarding some of the Nestle Corporation perspective as to, that's more of a reason of why the boycott should be in place. Other than that, I think therefore and the resolve sections would remain the same. So the whereas Nestle is the largest corporate water bottling company in the world and has extremely poor track record in recycling or respecting water rights. With its previous CEO, is it my way now? Okay.
Homes, new builds, and associated infrastructure requirements. Further be it resolved, the General Assembly directs the federal government to immediately remove the 2% cap on annual increases in department funding and overhaul its capital allocation system to provide needs-based funding for housing and infrastructure that accounts for current deficits, population growth, and inflation. Further be it resolved that General Assembly directs AIAI to take a advocacy role in advancing.
Is already well ahead on that and moving forward to the creation of a First Nation Housing Authority. So my question to AIAI is, what is our position? What is it that we're doing to look at taking over housing and being responsible for a First Nations housing-led approach here in Ontario?
Well, I think that's something that we still have to, have a part of our strategic plan, because I don't think that is part of it as of yet. But if that's something that I think we need to take a further look at that, and maybe we can, bring that back to Chiefs Council for discussion.
Security for our elders. So I will start at therefore and go on. Therefore, be it resolved, the General Assembly directs AIAI to include some security for elders and older adults as an issue under the Health and Social Advisory Board's Elders Priority Areas. Finally, be it resolved, the General Assembly directs the political executive to establish relationships with the relevant provincial ministries and federal departments and advocate for supplementing First Nation pensions as well as providing additional supports to ensure that no elders or other adults within our communities ever experience poverty and undue hardship. So this was moved by Chief Miracle and seconded by Councillor Olive Elm. Does the mover and
several elders in our community at Oneida, and and plus we're in that elders group now, and I know that we only get so much money as pension, so we know that there's a need among our people, elders, to raise their pension, if that's possible. And I know they share the non-native community, so I don't know whether we all get...
Any further comments?
Scully Stacy Phillips. I forgot to mention that last time.
Thank you.
It's just in regards to the long-term care. You know, Oneida has had one for several years. It's been through a lot of ups and downs, and I think one of the things that, you know, the council has been brought aware of is some of the financial challenges that some of the First Nations residents who are in our long-term care are having, paying for their beds or their rooms at the long-term care. We've been provided information from the long-term care facility that there are several First Nations individuals in our long-term care from our own community, but from the surrounding communities who...
Anyone have comments? Abstentions? Harvey?
Yes, Harvey Bell, Batchewana. In regards to the capital dollars, the federal dollars, I don't know if we asked the question of the candidates that were running for national and for the provincial. We're aware that the majority